There are moments where suddenly we've convinced ourselves that everyone is against you. But there's usually, if you look around careful enough, there's somebody, at least one person, and there's usually more, but there's at least one person that you can identify that's in your corner.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Tea. I'm your host, Tanya Child, and I'm excited because we're going to talk to Miss Karrisa Martino, and we're going to talk about how to be true to yourself. So, without me further going into the conversation right now, I'd like to offer the opportunity for Miss Karrisa to introduce herself. And I want to say, first of all, thank you for being on the show. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an absolute honor. My name is Karrisa Martino. I am an independent insurance broker. I focus in health, life, senior products, and anything that kind of falls in that realm. We work with over 80 different carriers, and I've been working with small business owners, families, and individuals here lately with all sorts of needs.
I always like to let our listeners know in the beginning that me and Miss Karrisa had a great conversation. We were talking about benefits and entrepreneur and all that great stuff. So before we dive more into what she does and how she can help you if you're an entrepreneur, let's talk about, how to be true to yourself. And I always like to ask, how did this become such a passionate subject for yourself? So, where did this passion to be your authentic self really reign true for you?
It's actually been something that came out of my childhood, believe it or not. I grew up kind of knowing a little bit more about myself than most people do. And the version of myself that I knew and the version of me that my parents or the rest of my family wanted me to be, even the peers around me, was not the same person. And so I felt myself, driving this uphill battle. And I've met several other people who tell me the same experience. And so I realized as I was growing up and started coming into myself as a teenager, and then eventually into college and really into the professional space, that there was going to be times that I had to make a decision, whether it was going to be best for me to be entirely authentically and genuinely myself or no. And there were days that the battle was hard. There were days that the battle was easy. But what I'll tell you is that battle is 100% worthwhile every single time. It doesn't matter what somebody's going to say to you. It doesn't matter how somebody, puts you down or does something, physically, mentally, emotionally to you. Being authentically you is the only way that you get that spiritual fulfillment that will come from that. Otherwise, you're always going to feel, unrest and you're always going to be looking and searching for this hole that's inside of you, and it's not really a hole. It's just this longing, this aching to be genuine to who you are.
Right. You touched on a really, like I said, near and dear subject, because I think a lot of the stuff we talk about is always like a transformation story, right? And we grow up, and I grew up in Connecticut. We get all these layers of things of what you're supposed to be in the world. But like you said, when people come across, say, this video, what would you say first of all would be like a source for you to find your strength? Where did you find your source of strength to be, okay, this is who I am? I know you said it was in the beginning, but we always have to draw from something. What did you draw your strength from for those who are looking for, I need something?
Honestly, a huge part of it was just finding the right kind of people that were around me, because not everybody is going to be against you. I can promise you that. And it doesn't matter how dark things are, because there are moments where suddenly we've convinced ourselves that everyone is against you. But there's usually, if you look around careful enough, there's somebody, at least one person, and there's usually more, but there's at least one person that you can identify that's in your corner. And I don't want to say tie yourself to that person, but find out what is their source of confidence in you and start to adopt that and appreciate that, because they had to have seen it in you first in order for them to have that level of faith inside of themselves about you, right? And so that's a huge part of it. There were moments that it was sheer will that I was just hanging on to. And then it also eventually developed into just realizing that I have the work ethic, I have the know-how, And I have been working on myself personally for so long that if somebody doesn't want to work with me because of, insert whatever, excuse here, whether it's my hair or I'm too creative or I'm too bold or whatever it is, right? Because I've heard all of those things, then they probably weren't the right person for me to be working with. And because I know that I have enough of a work ethic to go with all of that, then there were going to be plenty of other opportunities out there for me. And that same professional realization is something that I also had in the rest of my life. If I was too much for somebody else, well, guess what? That was a blessing, because that meant that I wasn't going to have to waste time, energy, heart, emotions on that kind of a person who was going to end up, being probably toxic for me in the long run anyway. And you can literally look at that, whether it's professional, your relationships, your financials. Okay. Because it's also going to be in your financials as well. If you don't like yourself, it'll show 100%. So learning how to be with yourself, right? It's hard. It's a hard battle. So part of that whole work ethic that I was telling you about is really having the work ethic to look at myself in the mirror and do the work and be okay.
Right.
So I had to learn how to be okay with myself first, because I had grown up being told that who I was not okay. So that was step
Right.
number. Finding that person that was in my corner and learning how to look at myself in the mirror. Step number 2 was finding other people who could be in my corner. Because if I don't surround myself with the right support system, and I don't care who you are, we're all Homo sapiens, right? We are communal animals. All right. So we all want to defy the whole world, but Lord have mercy, we're supposed to have people around us. So find somebody else who's going to be in that corner with you. And there's usually a good group of people that can become your sphere of influence. And you want people who are going to lift you up. All right. I don't care what kind of a person you are. Okay. You need people who are always going to be lifting you up. So that was step number 2, so that I could continue on this path of self-development where I am now. Now I have not arrived, nor do I believe I ever will in this lifetime, but I'm on this path of personal development and self-learning that has gotten me to where I am.
Right. Like I said, I've been, we all have to find our tribe. I always say, but
Mhm.
how, and this is sort of like segues into, it's like, you know, you have to be okay. And I like how you mentioned in first, like being okay with yourself and doing the work. And that could take a lot of different ways of what the work might be for you. Some people might journal, some people might walk, some people, spiritual
And I highly
relationship,
encourage you to try multiple ways. Find
I was gonna
one that's
say,
authentic to you.
so yeah, that was what sort of leads into, like, what kind of practice, I guess, would you, what has helped you with, do you have a specific practice that you started off with? Or, is this, just being creative, being okay creative? Did you find your tribe? How did you do the work? I mean, what I'm saying? How did you find that path?
No, that's a great question. I tried everything. All right. So let me share a story with you. It's a little bit dark, so I apologize in advance. Um, but I was a doormat. I remember I was graduating college and I didn't even know that I was doormat. That was the bad thing, right? I was graduating college and I was dating this gentleman who was a few years older than me. And I remember at one point he looked at me and just snapped and said, "Stop being a doormat." All right. Now, for as smart as I am, because I graduated with a very good GPA, multiple degrees, multiple minors, and everything else, I had to go look up what that meant. Okay. But I did. And I realized how right he was. I was to the point in my life where I just wanted somebody to be okay with me. I wanted somebody to not hate me. Whether we were talking about, peers or my family or whatever, I felt like I had spent my entire life fighting everybody around me. And I didn't want that to be the case anymore, because I didn't have the fight and the will left. I didn't have the energy left in me. I had drugged myself through the mud doing this. So I, you know, dove into all of these different methods and materials. And at first, I didn't trust anybody to reach out to. So I had to start with podcasts, like you were talking about, with books, and
Mhm.
finding all these different methods. And I tried meditating multiple different ways. Highly encourage you to at least listen to some YouTube videos and get some help from somebody else, because trying it on your own is not going to work. Um, And then I tried different kinds of, exercises outside of that. Now I've always been creative. Okay. I might have a background in insurance right now, but I have a music degree. I've taught ballroom dancing. I grew up with a wood shop at my house. I learned how to do stained glass work while I was in college. I've been doing a whole lot of metal work, which eventually is going to turn into me building and rebuilding cars and motorcycles. I've done landscaping. I have a background as a chef. So if I can create, I'm pretty happy. Right. So I also got into that and being okay with being creative and jumping from one thing to another and really appreciating the process of kind of finding myself in there. For me, I found that practicing philosophy was part of how I was starting to get to know myself better. So I read some Plato. And I read several other philosophers too. I like Plato the best, and I started asking myself some of these hard questions that he talks about in a lot of his works. So I found this true desire to change. And then from that point, as I'm getting into all these different materials, feeling like I'm being pulled in 100 directions, none of which even felt right, I still haven't done anything to the outside of me, right? I'm still trying to do everything to the inside. So on the outside, I'm still a little bit of a doormat. And I'm really grateful because I started looking for a mentor. I've talked with therapists. I love therapists. There's nothing wrong with them. They just never really gave me the tools that I was looking for. I wanted to be equipped to go out into the world. And so if you have a therapist that's working for you, please continue that work with your therapist. Okay, little public service announcement there. But for me, what I needed was a mentor. Somebody who was, not going to be my friend, someone who's going to tell it to me straight, somebody who wasn't necessarily going to hold my hand, but to know that there might be some moments where you kind of have to reach out and do that too. Things were so bad that they took me 2 hours north to this tiny little town that they lived in and literally had to physically show me how to introduce myself and start socializing with people. And I'm not kidding you. The worst thing that happened is that a few weeks after that entire session, he handed me a little bag of candy canes, put it in a basket, okay, because it was Christmas, and told me to go to the mall and say hello to somebody. And every time I said hello, I had to give them a candy cane, and I couldn't leave the mall until my basket was empty. That was frightening, and it took me over 8 hours. All right, I'm just grateful that it was
Right.
Christmas time because otherwise I don't know, I could have emptied my bag. But literally, things were not okay. All right. And I mean, you and I have talked. You probably wouldn't know that I'm that much of an introvert, but I legitimately am. So I had to do a lot of physical work on a regular basis. And it literally was daily. I was doing something daily. So I do like to journal. I really do like Hal Elrod's Miracle Morning. It was kind of very rejuvenating for my
Mhm.
mind. I do a lot of, reading. So at least 15 to 20 minutes every single day. I always push play in the morning. So I have some sort of, leadership, self-development, business, whatever I've got on. I've got something, self-development on about that as well. I started writing things physically on my mirror because I was also to the point where I wouldn't look at myself in the mirror either. I have this entire face of makeup on and I can do it without looking in the mirror because I literally had that kind of a self image.
Right.
And so I would write different things like little goals that I physically have to get done, but then I'd also have affirmations around the corner of my mirror too. So I have like this oval mirror and I had to check them off every single day. So the affirmations are written on my mirror so that I would stand in front of it and tell myself these things. And I had to look at myself. I'm
Mm.
not kidding you. One day it took me 20 minutes to look at myself in the mirror and go, I love you, and feel like I actually meant it. And I
Right.
wasn't just trying to go through the motions, which is also important, right? Once
Right.
you start this process of trying to implement things that you need to be genuine in doing them. And if you feel like you're just rolling through the motions, you got to stop and do it again.
Right. Right.
And so it's hard. I get it. It's 100% true because I hear it from everybody all the time. Well, that's too hard. Well, maybe it is, but the price on the back end of what you're paying for doing it is a lot less, and you're going to live a lot more fulfilling life than the price of never doing it, never knowing yourself, always feeling like you have to be somebody different with every single group of people that you walk into.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's Thank you for sharing your story.
Mhm,
I can relate. I can definitely relate. Doing the work and doing the mirror work, and but like you said, it starting with yourself really it really opens up the doors and transforms your life to a whole different level, and which I want to transition right now because Carissa's been dropping nuggets. We are way past our halfway mark, but that's okay because she was dropping some golden nuggets. I'm like, I'm picking it up. So let's talk about how does being true to yourself lead to what you're doing right now, because we had a great conversation about the entrepreneur and actually being okay and shopping around and not settling for the status quo, right? So
mhm.
tell a little bit about how this transferred to what you're doing right now. Because I'm gonna be totally when I first met Carissa, when she says I do insurance, I'm like, you don't look like the typical insurance woman. So again, tell us a little bit about how did this become so passionate for you and how you help others.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just mentioning how I have mentors in my life, and I really have, multiple sets of mentors that I've developed, and they all have different areas of specialties. So when I first left college, not only was I trying to do all that personal work on myself, but I also needed to do a lot of professional work as well. So I graduated college with a degree that I don't want to talk about right now because it was kind of null and void due to, a personal injury and some other things that were going on. I also didn't want to go back to college because if one more person told me that my question was beyond the scope of the class, I was going to lose it because I thought that I was paying entirely too much tuition money for someone to not help educate me because I was bored. So, in the in between of trying to figure out what was the next direction for me to go in, thankfully, 3 doors down from me is a former world talent scout for P&G. And he ended up, he goes, "Come by, I'll help you write a resume." Well, the man put me through multiple personality tests. He had me read a couple of different books and he talked to me for hours. Okay. So this man didn't really just help me develop this resume, which he legitimately did, but he also really got to know me at the core so that we could talk about what was the career path that I was going to need. And the end result was that I needed to go start a business in order to be fulfilled, which is hilarious. You're like, I'm how old with how much debt? And you want me to do what? Right. So actually fate might have slightly different, thought about that than I did. So I started going out and independent contracting because that's where I was going to start. I'm good at a lot of different things. I put myself through school with food and beverage, so I started there. Ended up meeting some mentors who ended up doing the personal work that I just told you about, and they were business owners themselves. So they truly saw in me the same thing that this former world talent scout had as well, and kind of took me through this leadership development program. And that's kind of how I got to the mindset of business ownership that I'm at today. But I got really good at running other people's businesses. And eventually, during the pandemic, which I'm sure everybody talks about now, I did end up with a pandemic job. And then suddenly I was running kitchens. And it was hard because I love food. And I also never thought that I'd be running a kitchen because I don't have a culinary degree. Okay. So pre-COVID, that would have been hard to eventually earn, and it would have taken a lot longer than it did for me. And I'm still grateful. But there's not a lot of people that are left in the industry right now. And most of them are very jaded. And I was starting to understand how some of the executive chefs that I'd come in contact with in my career had already lost their food passion. And I didn't want to lose that passion. So I was looking for a bridge job, thinking that I was going to go into UX design, which is a methodology that I had applied to everything that I had been doing, whether it was an event or a physical product or something online, as well as coaching. That was kind of the plan that I was headed for. But I really got out of food because I wanted to touch people more. I wanted to make a bigger impact on the lives of other people. So this recruiter reached out for insurance, and I'll be honest, I have been networking for years. Okay. With all the independent contracting, I have never liked anybody in this industry. They're always pushy, they're salesy, they have very little products, very little product knowledge. They can never answer my questions, right? And any other like slimy thing that you've ever felt about anyone who does either insurance or financial advisors. By the way, there are good ones out there. Okay, I've met some since then, but my impression of them at the time that this recruiter reached out was not great, and I was convinced I didn't want to do this. So you're laughing, but you know that this is legitimately the truth. However, I ended up being interviewed by the president of our division, and I saw that all those, excuses or bad things that I'd ever been exposed to were not ever going to be a problem here. And he sat me down after doing 3 interviews. We also did a 3-day training. And I just saw the heart of the people that are here and how we think about our clients and what we do for them with the education, the empowerment, and literally the fact that there's not one person that will come through here that I can't help in some way or another. And I've also lost several family members from being in the wrong product or not having an advocate. And so I was just thinking about it, going, I don't want other families to ever have to feel that way because I'm capable of doing this. So I stepped into this role. As it turns out, it can be creative because everybody is a puzzle. So I just need to, figure out what your puzzle looks like and how we can put it together. So that's really what I do with my clients is I sit them down, I ask them, comprehensive questions, get to know them, understand their needs, their budget, all of those other things, whatever their fears are, what things they've experienced that are great, but what things they've experienced that are not so great with insurances in the past, and see if we can't really address all of those different items there. I try to educate them about the products that I'm recommending and how to use them, but I also educate them, hey, you know what? I'm licensed to do this. It took a whole thing for me to get here. So if you don't remember something, don't feel ashamed. Just reach out to me. I'm happy to help at any point because I'm here to partner with you for the rest of your life.
Right,
That's
right. So
really
it's like I'm here. It seems like you took everything the empathy that you felt when you were trying to be yourself and applying it to the clients that come in and looking for connection or insurance. That's
Mhm.
awesome. And like I said, I'm trying to stay on track because you have a really great story. So I'm definitely going to invite her to come back. So we haven't got to that part, but my part, right, I would like to reach out right now is what's the one thing you want to leave the audience with from this interview today?
If you are struggling with anything that has to do with, your insurance, especially, but if you're also struggling with anything else, I really like to network. If you haven't kind of, read between the lines and learned that about me today during this interview, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to do a free review of your insurance at any time, but I'm also happy to connect you to anybody that I know. I have a network that is growing nationally now, a little internationally as well. So if there's something that I can do to help, please let me know. I'm not always going to be 100% equipped, but I might know somebody else who would be a good fit for that.
Well, thank you, Miss Karrisa. And where can people find more information about you, your services, and what you do?
My website is inhealthandlife.com. My email is my first name, spelled Karrisa at usabg.com. And my direct line that you can call or text is 513-434-4466.
Again,
Thank you.
thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you. So I always love your personality, your energy. So hopefully I'm one of those tribe members that we can connect and share continued stories. So I guess that's my unofficial question. Would you come back and have a deeper dive or another conversation with me?
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, I want to say thank you to you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your insight with us. It's been a pleasure. And I also want to remind everybody who tuned in that thank you for tuning in. And remember that feedback is always welcome. Remember, all of the links that Karrisa mentioned will be posted down in the description box below. So make sure you check it out down there. If you've enjoyed what she shared today, please hit that like button, maybe follow up with a comment down below. And again, if you want to keep getting great insights like what Ms. Karrisa shared today and others that will be coming on or have come on before, please hit that subscribe button over there. And remember, take things in stride, go with the flow, and create your own path. And we will see you back here on another episode of Coffee with Tea. All right. Bye-bye.